All right. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today we're playing Minecraft, episode 9 of the podcast. And we're here with Drewski's. We're already done some mining already. How are we doing today, Drewski?
Doing good. A lot to talk about. A lot has fucking happened in the last not even 4 or 5 days. So I'm ready to kind of explore it a little bit.
Yeah, I'm ready to explore some things too. And you know what? I am a little bit mad about some things, but we'll get into that in a bit.
You're mad about some things?
Yeah, like the Nintendo Switch 2 price, man. Super expensive.
Jeez. Why is it more expensive?
Well, the retail price right now is set for $450, and that's that's completely understandable because it's better hardware, better technologies. It's a second console. The console's bigger. Bigger means better in a lot of cases and contexts, which is to be expected. However, Nintendo's like, you know what? You guys keep complaining about the prices. Yeah, Liberation Day was April 2nd. We're going to put a pause on pre-orders because of the whole tariff situation, which we're going to get into in a little bit.
Yeah, I was about to say, was it really a Liberation Day?
Yeah, they announced the console during Liberation Day. They set the price out for Liberation Day, and then like the day after, because people were mad, they're like, all right, we're stopping pre-orders. So,
right. But was it really a Liberation Day, though, is the thing?
Yeah, because here's why. While Trump was running for president, I vaguely read this somewhere, but I guess Nintendo was anticipating that like he was gonna win the election, and so he was the fact that like he was gonna be placing like X amount of tariffs in China. So Nintendo kind of moved overproduction for the Switch 2 from China to Vietnam.
Okay.
And so on April 2nd, this is obviously changed. On April 2nd, I guess Vietnam ended up having a 46% tariff, while China ended up having a 34% tariff.
Okay.
So what does that mean for people who were thinking about pre-ordering the Nintendo Switch? Is that instead of purchasing the $450 base edition, because of the tariffs and it's 46%, you can like about, I believe it was 70 to 80% more. So now you're looking at spending around like $550 just for a Nintendo Switch 2, which is kind of crazy. So
I guess diving into it, it's kind of crazy. Oh, dang, I'm killing a baby sheep right now.
I see it.
It's kind of weird because we were all under the impression, I think, that these things were going to stay. Right. And it was almost a back and forth of like, oh, he's going to implement these tariffs and everything's going to get more expensive around the world because technically, yes, things do get more expensive when someone places tariffs in the country because it's just an extra payment that people have to make. And of course, businesses are going to be like, well, if it costs me $50 to make something and I'm selling it for $100, and now technically because of the tariff, it's going to be more expensive. I don't want to have to pay it because I want to keep my margins the same. So I'm just going to make the product more expensive so that when the consumer buys it, that's where I'm going to be able to get the money to pay for that difference.
Right.
So technically, yeah. And so we were all under the impression that it was probably going to be like a 10% tariff across the board, or in other words, a word that's been floating around a lot is reciprocal, meaning I tariff you 30%, you tariff me 30%. I think everyone and their mom was under the impression that that was what was going to happen. And although it wasn't necessarily a good thing, or a great thing, I should say, it made a little bit sense because technically, yes, like we do have a negative economic impact from losing jobs to other countries overseas, and globalization is a good thing, but there also are bad things to it. So when you look at it in simple terms, sure, it is a bad thing. But then he came out on April 2nd and came up with this bogus calculation that he was using, which basically, rather than just tariffing them the same rate, was including all kinds of different measures, economic measures like trade deficits, which is where we buy more of their stuff than they buy of our stuff, basically all kinds of things, to where the number was almost just a giant guess. And it was an absurd number. I think China was like, what, 34% or something like that?
Oops.
So yeah, it was kind of crazy of a number, to the point where people were like, oh my God, this is so bad that we might actually go into recession now. I mean, even I thought the same thing. I was like, if these numbers stay, like no one can afford to buy what was $80 Nike shoes at, you know, $300 or whatever it would end up being with those kinds of numbers. I mean, it wouldn't be those numbers, but basically it would definitely make the price so expensive that people could not pay that right now. People could not handle that increased price. So that's what the market was crashing on. Yet there was still kind of hopes that, like, and when I say market, the reason why it's so important that people realize, like, oh, well, why would I care about the stock market, is because the stock market is a predictor of what's going to happen in everyday life. So even though you're not in the stock market, if the stock market goes down, you should be paying attention as to why, because most likely the reason it's going down has something to do with how it can affect average day Americans. So the market went down this time because it was assuming that these higher prices that would come from the tariffs would cause everyday Americans to not be able to afford products anymore and not spend things. And basically we'd go into a recession where no one can buy anything and there'd be no money in the economy. So like it is a big deal in a way to everyone. It affects every single person out there. So that was the impression. People thought they were scared. And then today he completely did a 180.
Okay, what did he do?
So today he basically said China, because they're the only ones that fought back,
Right.
it will be tariffing the hell out of them. But everyone else, because they didn't basically tear stuff back right away and started a conversation, we're going to put a 90-day pause on these tariffs and start negotiating instead. So people are assuming that the entire time his plan was just go super nuclear and crazy with his plan, have people freak out, have them come rushing to and calling the White House for negotiations, and then start negotiations that way, because he probably felt like if he just put a normal tariff on him and did not freak him out, then there wouldn't be any urgency to start communicating with the White House, which makes sense. If that was what his plan was all along, it makes sense. Still, obviously, he was playing with a little bit of fire because you don't necessarily know for sure what other countries are going to do. It just happened to start working out in his favor, it looks like.
Gotcha. Where'd you go? I lost you for a sec.
Well, you never lose me. I'm always with you.
I'm inside of a cave right now. Where'd you go?
I don't know how to use the map on here.
You have to like
I don't have a map.
Yeah, I know what the map doesn't come by default. You have to like find out these
To
coordinates.
work for it.
Exactly means to be in a recession for like people who don't know what that means. So like what like a recession is.
Sure. I feel like most people listening to this are old enough to remember what happened in 2008, right? Or at least have learned about it in school.
Right? Yeah.
That happened for a completely that happened for a completely different reason. But when a recession normally hits, businesses start to go bankrupt. People don't have money to spend on products because most of the time the people start losing their jobs. So let me explain it in this way. If the tariffs went through, given the fact that companies don't necessarily know what the impacts of tariffs would be right away, because no one really knows what Trump's going to do from day to day, as we obviously see, then the first thing companies do is they say, well, since we can't predict that, we are going to do the easiest possible thing, which unfortunately is to cut cost. And the easiest way to cut cost is by not hiring people and firing people. Well, it's the easiest thing to do. It's if you're an executive and you need to get rid of $500 million worth of expenses, right? Shifting an entire order of products from China or changing your entire strategic plan for the last 6 months is probably going to be a lot harder than just saying, okay, well, we hired 1,000 people. Let's just get rid of them first.
Right. That makes sense.
So that is what starts a recession, because then these people that don't have jobs aren't getting hired anywhere. They can't spend any money. They start defaulting on their credit card. They start defaulting on their mortgage payment. The banks then aren't getting the money that they used to get, so they're not making as much money, and everything starts to go down.
I've these tariffs at least like affected you personally, because I know like I have some people who have like invested in Roth IRAs already, and like they've lost a lot of money, or at least a lot of money for them or their standards. So
Sure.
I mean, regardless, like it's
Probably.
right. So
Yeah, it definitely affects everyone. It probably hasn't affected young people per se, or like even the lower or to lower middle class. Just
Right.
because most people they don't really pay attention to this because they don't really have money in the market. I saw someone say recently in the Trump administration, and they made a pretty good point. They said that 80% of stocks are owned by the top 1% of people,
Okay.
or something like that. Then the next 20% are owned by the next 40% of people. And then after that, the bottom 50% of Americans normally don't even own stocks because they just have debt. And that's all they have. They're just worried about their debt. Right. So, in terms of how it's affected me personally, of course it's affected me because, I mean, maybe not monetarily, right? It's not like I have a bunch of money in the market. But I mean, I would not want to be going into the job market within the next couple months worried about whether I'll even be hired because companies are worried about a recession. So I personally had that fear. A lot of people in our position in life who are about to graduate should probably have had the same amount of fear if they were paying attention.
Oh my God, I'm gonna die.